Hello, my name is Owen, and welcome to my reading plans in 2025. Now, let me preface this video by saying something, okay? Let me just say, I'm not intending to lie to you for the entirety of this video's length. That being said, as with every year, future me is sending back messages through the channels of time telling me that I was wrong in every aspect of what I'm about to tell you. And listen, so this kind of runs completely against the whole purpose of a video like this, which I don't know why I'm leading at with the first 30 seconds in, but I believe reading specifically as a hobby is one that does better without railroaded plans, right? Even the plans I gave today, they're a little bit vague. They're a lot of bit vague with a few specifics, because I feel like it needs to be fluid what you're picking up, what you're reading. If you got everything planned out to the T, I'm going to read this book for this amount of time and switch to this book for this amount of time, just in time for this release, I think things get lost in the shuffle a little bit there. And then it starts to become less like a hobby and more like a job. And then if you ever do hit a reading slump, which can hit you out of nowhere, you're kind of stuck and then you fall behind and you got different kind of pressures going on. That's why even like my rereads and stuff, I tried to get Stormlight in before Stormlight 5. And I did that, but I didn't put myself in a box, you know? Like I wasn't gonna burn the world down if I didn't make my goal in time. If it took me a little bit longer, that would have been fine. I ended up doing it with time to spare, and yet I'm still reading the book that I was rushing to finish 3 weeks later. So it's irrelevant, okay? It's irrelevant. But listen, what we're gonna talk about today is our aspirational goals. This is an aspirational video. This is not a fortune-telling video, okay? In general, just talking about some of the vague things I'd like to do, I think the composition of my reading from last year, dare I say, it was near perfect. Dare I say I'm a genius? We all knew this, though. But my variety of genres, my variety of authors, I thought it was near perfect. Maybe we could have used a little bit more nonfiction, perhaps, maybe a little bit more classical literature. Although I feel like at the end of the day, looking at my list, I had a decent amount in there. Maybe not like 1800s classics, I didn't read a whole bunch of those, only a few. But in terms of classic literatures, from the early 1900s, we dabbled into that time frame quite a bit, and you know what? I'm proud of it. I hope to keep those numbers similar, if not a little bit higher. Nonfiction, we could definitely bump up. I think it's honestly a down year overall for me in 2024. It was a down year on nonfiction for me, but that's not a genre I'm going to force, right? Because you absolutely cannot force a boring nonfiction. But I would just like those numbers to be higher. But in terms of genres, we're a little bit heavy on the fantasy. I'm not going to say I'm going to decrease fantasy because I said that last year and I read more fantasy than ever before. But I'd like to keep that probably, if not the same, less than. Maybe do a little bit more sci-fi because I do like that genre. Romance, I feel like a good amount of romance in there, and I want to keep that the same. Literary fiction, I feel like we do a little bit more as well, but I also think that comes with the territory of a lot of classics. So I think that'll kind of balance itself out there. But in terms of genre layouts, expect very similar from 2024 because I really think that was a sweet spot for me. And I'm not the type of person to really kind of, anymore at least. It used to be I read one good book, I'm reading everything from that genre for the next 6 months until I get burned out of it. Now I feel like I need a lot more variety. If I read a really great fantasy book, even if it's a part of a great trilogy, I usually take a step back, read something completely different, and then go back to it. I've kind of lost that, I'm sucked into this genre, I'm sucked into this world of a series or whatever. I kind of lost that a little bit. But I overall think it's a good thing for me in the long run. But that's in general. Wide variety of authors, wide variety of genres. Another goal, I had a similar goal last year. I want to repeat it this year. I want to read new releases. I got a couple new releases that I got pointed out already, and I'm hoping to stumble upon more, which is a good thing. Just because I want to have my finger on the pulse of society, right? I mean, a lot of the new releases I read are hyped up to begin with, but I just want to be 40 years from now, when I'm old, I want to be like, I read that classic the day it came out, or the week it came out, or I bought it the day it came out, but it took me 3 months to read it. I just want to say something akin to that, okay? I want to say I was on the ground floor of a modern day classic, so that when I'm old and gray, I could just say I was there, right? Because isn't that all about bragging rights, this hobby, at the end of the day, right? How many books you read, how many pages you read, what classics you read, how smart you are. That's what this is at the end of the day. Let's not kid ourselves, okay? But that's just a general thing. I like to get new releases in, and there seems to be a handful of interesting ones out there. Only a couple I'm definitely going to read, but some have been catching my eye, but we're going to keep that vague for now. But let's get into the specifics, shall we? I have a list of books that I definitely am going to read in 2025. Like I said, these aren't all guarantees, but I do feel confident that I can read these books, and that's why they're on my list. Our goal for the entire year is to read 45 books. I think my pace for last year, my reading pace was sustainable, so I absolutely think we can do that, but we only read 42 books, so I'm actually going to pick it up a little bit, which I'm a little bit scared at. I was tempted to just keep it at 40 again because I liked that pace. Didn't feel like I was rushing, didn't feel like I was at the end of the year, hadn't read a lot of small books to get my number up or anything like that. And yet, I increased it anyway because I just like self-punishment, I guess. But I only have 8 books on my, I'm definitely going to read list. So that's about, it's less than 20% of the books that I plan on reading in the year are pre-planned. I think it's a great spread, okay? And let's just get right into it. The one thing I want to read, which I wanted to read last year, I just never had the chance to it. I want to get back into Robin Hobb, Realm of the Elderling series, and read the Tawny Man trilogy, which is the third trilogy in her Realm of the Elderlings universe. I just loved Farseer trilogy so much. Some of my favorite books that I've read in the past 5 years, and Live Ship was very, very good as well. Love those characters and excited to get back into the world of Fitz. It's been too long. It's been over a year. It's been almost a year. It's been a year and a half since I read a book with Fitz in it. It's about time. It's about time. I expect that to happen, if not in the first quarter of the year, in the second quarter of the year. First half of the year for sure. I plan on reading, dare I say, all 3 of the Tawny Man trilogy books, and I'm very excited to get back into Robin Hobb books. And other than that, moving on, so that's 3 books there. We're going to read God, Emperor of Dune, probably in the first half of the year as well. I really liked the first 3. Children of Dune was my book of the year for 2024. Check out my overview, top books of the year book video if you haven't checked that out yet. But Children of Dune was my favorite. I want to continue the series and at least read God, Emperor, and I plan on doing that relatively soon as well. And then in terms of other things in the first half of the year, The Devils by Joe Abercrombie is one of the new releases that I'm excited for. I did like the first Law trilogy of his, and I didn't read the sequel trilogy, although I want to eventually. Sometimes I felt like his style of grimdark is almost too depressing for me in some ways, which I do read depressing books, but I just feel like living in a series like that, it doesn't sit with you in a way like a depressing book like A Little Life would. It's kind of just more like, oh, really? Like you watch an episode of Game of Thrones that does that. It's like every page is Pedro Pascal getting his head busted in, right? Sorry for spoilers, all right? The show's been out for how many years now? But you know what I'm talking about. It's just that feeling at the end of that episode is like every book of Joe Abercrombie's, which I'm not always looking for that specific flavor, right? But it seems like it's a new concept for him. It looks interesting. The synopsis is very fascinating to me, so I'm excited to check that out. And that comes out in May, I believe. So that'll be a 2025 release, which is very exciting. And then before I get to my other new release that I plan on reading the first half of the year, I guess the last fantasy book I want to read, kind of along the lines of the Devil's Tawny Man trilogy, is Crooked Kingdom. So book 2 of the Six of Crows duology. Mostly because it's just been sitting on my shelf. I liked the first book. I didn't love the first book, Six of Crows, but it did come in a box set, right? And I'm not going to have books sitting on my shelf if I haven't read them. I'm not that type of fraud, guys. Some people like them just for the aesthetics, but my personal philosophy is this. If you're going to have it on your shelf, you better have read it. Because one day, someone's going to walk up to you, they're going to see your bookshelf, and they're going to say, oh, what'd you think of this book? And you're going to have to look them in the eye and say, I haven't read it. Oh, you know what? This is what you're going to do because you're a coward. You're going to look them in the eye and say, I haven't read it yet, even though you know you don't plan on reading that, okay? So stop lying to yourself. Actually set a plan to read it eventually. Even though I said you can't plan out reading. I know I said that earlier, but listen, me from 9 minutes ago is a moron because this is far more important, right? If you have a book on your shelf, in your mind, at least tell yourself that you're going to read it, okay? Don't give up on it, okay? Or get it off your shelf, give it to someone who will read it, sell it. I don't care. Get it off your shelf. It's disrespectful to me personally, okay? And just to me. And if that's not enough, then what do I mean to you, okay? That reminds me, by the way, There's actually 9 books I want to read, so we're going to mess with those percentages a little bit I was talking about earlier. Here it is. I was going to talk about it, but then I realized it wasn't anywhere near me. But I bought the Murakami book recently, and it cost me a pretty penny. It cost me like $40. But kind of going into the realm of books on my shelf that I haven't read yet, I did buy this on an impulse in December, so I actually plan on reading this very shortly. I haven't read a Murakami book, and I have no idea what this is about. The City and Its Uncertain Walls, so I might read that. If not this month, the next month. So that'll be another early quarter one. But to wrap up the shelf thing, the things that are bothering me on my shelf, one of the big projects of the year, not necessarily I want it to take a long time in the year, but I'm just not in a rush to start it, but it needs to be finished by the end of the year, is to read my final behemoth, War and Peace. That's been on the shelf. That's at least the one like classic I want to read for the year. Hopefully I get a couple more in there, but definitely want to read War and Peace. I started it briefly a couple of years ago, and then I was trying to do like a chapter a day thing, and then I just got bored and I didn't read a chapter one day. I'm like, well, then why are you doing a chapter a day if you're not gonna read a chapter a day? I'm just gonna read it like a normal book, like a normal person. I'm not smart enough to do the one day and really absorb it like I thought I was gonna try to. But I definitely want to read War and Peace this year, and that's gonna be the big classic. That's gonna be a project. It's a long book. It's a dense book as well. And then finally, the other new release that I want to read this year is the new Emily Henry book, which will come out in the spring. She must just have like a yearly spring release schedule because her new book last year also came out in the spring. But this is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. So excited to throw that in there. I think she's a great writer. I think her romances are fun. They're usually fairly light, and it usually fits in pretty nicely to whatever I'm reading at the time, because usually I'm reading like a little bit darker stuff or a little bit denser stuff, and she comes in there with a solid story. Hopefully it's better than the last Emily Henry new release, but regardless, I know it's going to be solid writing, so I'd be happy to check it out. The only other major thing that I would like to try in 2025, those are the 9 books that I would like to read of my own volition. I'm sure there's going to be a lot that just surprised me coming out of nowhere, impulse buy, stuff like that. We were counting for that because, like I said, 45 minus 9, 36 books left, except in my ranking video of 2024, which I encourage you all to check out, I asked you to comment what were your top books of 2024. So I thought it might be interesting, instead of like going month to month, maybe I just pick, I don't know if I do it every month, maybe I pick 12, that's a little ambitious, don't you think? 12 of your guys' favorite books that you told me in the comment section of my top books of 2024, and then I read them throughout 2025, and like it wouldn't be as aggressive as, my old series was like, hey, like this is your reputation on the line. I mean, it will give me a lot of insight into your personality. If your favorite book was one that I think personally sucks, what does that say about the year you had? Okay, maybe you're not an idiot, but you must have had a really crappy year if that was your favorite book. In case it's bad, it might be great. Who knows? But I just think it'll be fun to check in on stuff like that, because I'm sure in my weaknesses in my reading area, I don't read enough new releases. Don't read a lot of nonfiction. I don't read enough blah 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 blah. You guys, as an aggregate, as like a scatter plot, would read more diversely than I ever could by myself. So if I read your favorite books, I'm sure there's a lot of overlap because we're all in the same place, right? I will get access to different areas of the reading realm, okay, and consolidate my strength for my inevitable takeover. But really, I'm just curious, like if I see a book on there, I've never heard of it, and you say it's your favorite book of the year, which has happened a lot, which made you think of this idea, I kind of want to check it out. And I think it'd be an interesting idea, and I could kind of like give you guys like whoever, like this was this person's favorite book of 2024. We're gonna read it in March. I'm not gonna give you the schedule because I'm not gonna follow it. I'm gonna have a schedule in my head, but that's just an idea of like what you can expect from me if I just picked a random book and you're like, hey, that was my favorite book of the year, and then you watch the video going, hey, blank your name, this was your book. I read it, and this is my opinion. Just give you that jolt of adrenaline, jolt of fear that like maybe like I'm going to say something hurtful to your credibility. Like maybe I will. I'm on Hinge. Who could stop me? But I think that would be fun. Okay, and that would like potentially, like listen, January's already started, right? So maybe we wouldn't do January, but potentially like 11 or 12 additional books to that list. That are kind of like set in stone, question mark. I mean, I could pick the 12 and then change the 12 and just say you guys said it was, and who's going to check? But That's the only thing that scares me, is because then at that point we're over 20 books of like, I've already decided them on January 1st, which could put me in a pickle at the end of the year. But you know what? I think I'd read a lot of great books that way. So again, going back on myself a third time, is it good to be regimented? Is it good not to be regimented? This is why this video might give you a complete lie and failure. But this is just where I'm currently at the moment, right? I like the freedom. I have some freedom. I have half my books, at least half my books, more than half my books built in of freedom, right? Spur of the moment. I need something to spice things up. I need something short. I need something long. I need something fresh. I need something funky. And the other half is just I got a dedicated plan and keep myself motivated, keep myself enjoyable, and force myself to read some great books that I wouldn't have otherwise. At the end of the day, the smartest Owen of this entire video is the one that's talking right now. So let's just go with that. And it sounds like a very exciting year. What I want to know from you guys is this. New releases that you have your eye on. We talked about The Devils. We talked about Emily Henry. I know there's a ton of other good stuff there. I've seen a couple of them, but I want to know what you guys have your eye on, because instead of me having to put in work and like Google things and like research, you guys could just like put it in my comment section, and I get like in a list, like YouTube like will just consolidate it, and I just get to read it, and I get to do less work, and I get great books ideas there as well. And you know what? That's what I need you for, okay? That's what I need you for. Please give me support. I appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video and you want to see more like in the future. And as always, thank you for sticking around.